Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We have a awesome guest for everybody to listen to about the JFK assassination over 60 years ago, soon to be 61 years ago in November. We have Skip joining us. He is an extensive researcher in the JFK assassination. Thank you very much for joining us today, Skip.
Hey guys, I am really it's an honor to be here. I just kind of flinch at the term researcher because my credentials could be questioned. Um, I the way I prefer to describe it is I am I'm a Gen X 50-plus-year-old guy who's super interested in the topic, and it's kind of interesting how I got to this point in my life. But it's only been going on for a little over a year and a half, I guess. No, truthfully, November 22nd, 2022, I got this wild notion. So when I tell people about the way I got started, well, you have to go all the way back to 1979, 1980 or so.
Okay.
I was not even quite a teenager, and my father, uh, just out of the blue, of course, my dad was a baby boomer, and he would have been 20 something or so in 1963. But just out of the blue, he shared with me this article one day, and it was a comparison of all of the coincidences between the Lincoln assassination and the Kennedy assassination. Now, many people have seen this. Uh, Lincoln was shot in a theater, and Booth ran to a warehouse,
Mm-hmm.
and Kennedy was shot from a warehouse, or Oswald shot from a warehouse and ran to a theater. That's just one of over a dozen of these type comparisons. And I said, oh man, that is super weird and awesome. I really am, interested in that. And then I saw copies of Time Life articles. This was all as a teenager. Uh, so I can say that I've been fascinated with the case since teenage years. Read everything I could get my hands on about it. And I'm not the only one. I was born in 1967. So I was not around during the Kennedy administration. I have encountered people who actually lived the events, it, for whom it was very traumatic, and they still live it, and so they are obviously still interested in the topic. But anyway,
I have
I
that's very. I'm going to interject real quick. I apologize. I have never heard the comparison between the Lincoln assassination and the JFK assassination. The similarities from the assailant's perspective. I've never heard that before. It's interesting.
they were both they both won their election in a year ending in 60. Uh, Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy, and Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln. Um, and they go on, and many of them are a stretch, but it's enough to make you scratch your head and go, there are people out there who will make more of it than I will. And let me say from the outset, I am not what people would call a conspiracy theorist. When it comes to that is to say, I am not on. Uh, I don't believe the Earth was flat. I believe
Thank
that
you.
we actually did land people on the moon, um, and so I don't. I'm not in that category. When it comes to the JFK topic, I have flip flopped my position over the years. There was a time in my life when I was strictly Oswald did it. It was
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, Oswald did it. But then more recently, there a lot some stuff has happened, right, since the 80s and 90s. We know more. Um, but just back to the story.
Yes.
In I don't know, so fast forward from the early 80s, 1991, Oliver Stone's movie JFK comes out, and that had a huge impact on me. And obviously a lot of other people, and we'll talk about that as we go. Um, and then fast forward again, not a whole lot. I lived my life. I grew up. I built a career. I had a family. Um, and then uh, November of 2022,
Oh,
I'm on Thanksgiving break, and I got some time on my hands. Uh, and I was started thinking about New Year's resolutions. This is going to sound mundane, but I'm like, okay, I don't, not a huge New Year's resolution guy, but I'll make one. What the heck? 2023, I am going to travel to Dallas, and I'm going to read up again, get refamiliarize myself with the whole mystery. I'm going to go to Dallas. I really want to see the Texas School Book Depository. I want to see the sixth floor museum. I want to walk those streets, um, and see as much as I can and actually be there in person. So that was my huge plan for 2023. So sitting there on a couch at a resort, Thanksgiving break, I made I made this New Year's resolution in November, and I said I got a great idea. Um, I'm going to start a TikTok channel that is just about my pilgrimage to Dallas. So that's when I started it,
oh,
November 2022. So we're coming up on 2 years. Here's the thing: I did not realize that there were so many people like myself who are still interested in the case after all that. I felt like, they tell you on TikTok to pick a category, a very specific niche, and then stick with it. That's what I did. It wasn't. I'm a history buff. I minored in history. I love history. Um, I never thought that I would focus in so narrowly to United States history, specifically the 60s, specifically 1963, but even more specifically, November 22nd, 1963. But that's what I did. 2 years later, or nearly 2 years, it'll be 2 years in November. 149, by the time I finish this podcast, I'll be approaching 150,000 followers on TikTok who are there because they are also interested.
that's right.
I am not one of the largest TikTok creators, but I am probably the largest JFK related TikTok, and that's all we talk about. And I occasionally take small side trips down other paths because I am a fan of history. But my TikTok account, which is the reason why I came to your attention at all, um, is something that has just. My first viral video was back in March of 2023. And so I have been surprised that time to that this many people are interested in the topic. And the TikTok account just became something that, well, it's my new hobby now. This is what I do with my spare time. And I'm just a regular guy. I have a regular bachelor's degree in business. Uh, excuse me. That's it. I don't have. There are a lot of people who are more credentialed than me, and along the way, I've learned that the actual serious researchers, man, they know more than I do. Um, but here's what I've learned: there are a lot of people who don't have all the facts. It's not that I've revealed anything new about the JFK case. I've just revealed old information to new people. And a lot of things that people don't realize or had never heard. That it isn't new. It came out in the House Select Committee on Assassinations in 1976, 1977. Uh, but it's new to them because they have not read or studied as much as other people. Um, and I I have followers on both sides of the political spectrum. I deliberately keep my account as non-political as possible. Of course, that tries to slip in there all the time. But
Yeah.
as far as the TikTok account is concerned, it's apolitical in the sense that, hey, we're only talking about what happened in 1963 here and nothing else. But I get people a lot of people asking, why does it still matter? 60 years now, 61 years later,
It's a very
why does
important
any of it
topic.
still matter? And there's two reasons that I give. And I have videos on this, but I still love talking about it. Every time I talk about it, I get energized. Two big things happened on November 22nd, 1963, because we'd had assassinations before.
Mm-hmm.
JFK was different.
Yep.
The first thing that happened was, in a single moment, we entered the era of live TV coverage. You are there, you're watching it happen with your own eyes. While they weren't live in Dealey Plaza, every moment after they were live. And when Walter Cronkite broke in on CBS, that started the 24/7 news coverage, and they were on 24/7 through the entire weekend. Uh, it changed the way that we got our news because prior to then, my parents, everything they knew, they read in newspapers. But now we entered the era where we saw it with our own eyes. Not me, I wasn't born yet, but it just changed our culture dramatically because of the technology involved.
Well,
That's the first thing.
that is a very interesting point because since, as you just mentioned before, then we were strictly maybe hour news, 2 hour news, and once he was assassinated, as you just mentioned, it was 24-hour news on that fateful day, November 22nd, 1963. So you continue on with the second topic here, the second point that you're about to make.
The second major thing is probably even more important because uh, I say we as a culture is what I mean when I say we. We as a culture, the very first thing that happened was we saw this shocking thing happen. And then 3 days later, the assassin was himself assassinated before he ever had a chance to be brought to trial. Right away, that's weird, right?
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, common sense says, uh, wait a second. Uh, it's like the moment that, and I'm not going to draw a huge parallel here, but you saw one airplane fly into one of the twin towers, and you thought, "What in the hell is going on?" And then you saw the second plane fly into the second tower, and right away you knew
Mm-hmm.
this is trouble. It was the same thing with Kennedy. Kennedy can't never. The nation is in shock. They can't believe this happened. And then 3 days later, Oswald is shot, and right away you're like, "What is going on?"
Red flags,
But
right?
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, like
I think it's pretty unanimous across the board at this point that everyone in the common consensus of this whole narrative is that Lee Harvey Oswald was either straight up just a fall guy and he wasn't directly involved, or B, he was involved to some extent, but he got played himself and they still made him a fall guy. No matter what, the narrative still falls out kind of the same at the end. Like he was not the sole conspirator or anything of that nature. There was something far more complex at play.
Yeah, I think that we should
yeah,
briefly mention what is on the record for what happened that day, right?
Yeah.
Lee Harvey Oswald shot 2 times,
Hmm.
killing JFK and
three
hitting,
times,
hitting
Or
three
three
times
times, sorry.
and hitting
Yep.
Connolly. That's what's on the Warren Committee document, right?
Hmm.
which is the segue to my second point because the Warren Commission report, um, the committee appointed by Johnson, has Alan Dulles and Gerald Ford on it, and Chief Justice Earl Warren is the chair of the committee, and they bring their report to Johnson not quite a year later, 1964. Well, what happened then? And that's the second major reason why we still study this case. Because everyone knew when the Warren Commission report came out that it was a bunch of nonsense fluff. November 22nd, 1963, and the year after, that was the linchpin for our society suddenly not trusting anything the government told us anymore.
That is a very valid point.
That changed our society, that changed our culture. And so, those two reasons, live TV coverage and us not trusting the government anymore, those were the two major things that changed our world because of the assassination of JFK.
Hmm.
So that's it. And that's at the root of my content. And when people ask me why, I literally get people coming on saying, none of this matters anymore. It does. It still does matter. Anyway, that's the story of how I got here.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Can I ask you something right off the cuff? Just to kind
Yep.
of plant the seed out there for later discussion, like more in depthly. If from everything that you have been doing research on yourself and digging into, at the end of the day, who do you think, what entity, like what is your uh, standpoint on who was responsible for the JFK assassination?
I get this question a lot too. A lot of people they want to cut right to the chase, right? That's natural. Okay, if Oswald didn't pull the trigger, who did? Um, and opinions vary, right? But when I am in a corner, I'm not saying right now, I'm just saying,
Thank you.
Yeah.
when pressed on the issue, um, I think that it's probably less important who the actual triggermen were, and more important that Oswald really, in my opinion, had some idea that something was happening, but didn't realize the full extent of it, and that the plot was orchestrated by the CIA, without a doubt in my mind, and that specifically James Angleton, when you start looking at the information on him, that Angleton was probably the actual specific architect behind the entire plot. I don't have it all fleshed out. There are people who do. Um, as I go deeper and deeper, I spend more of my time debunking common myths than I do trying to figure out who the trigger man was.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but all that to say, I really do think that the CIA had sort of an extra governmental presence. They operated above Congress, above the president. As I was telling you before we started, that Alan Dulles and his brother
Mhm.
John, they both were of the ilk that thought themselves smarter than everybody else.
Yeah.
So, and then when you start digging even deeper, seems like E. Howard Hunt, who was had notorious ties to the CIA, tried, at least in a somewhat lame but last minute way, to connect the dots. And a lot has been written about his deathbed confession, in which he draws a line uh, straight up,
Yeah.
from his level, like the Frank Sturgis level, on up through James Angleton, all the way to Alan Dulles, and ultimately to Lyndon B. Johnson. So there's plenty of people out there that who think that Lyndon B. Johnson was at the top of the plot. So
Yeah.
I cannot tell you who the actual triggermen were. I don't believe that Oswald was one of the triggermen.
Yeah, I don't either. I've been to the point of shot. Like I've been there. Like being from being a Dallas native myself, like I've been all up where the JFK assassination has taken place. I've also seen where there's entrances to tunnels and other things that go underneath the area right there. And there's just off the top of my head, I know of at least two. Yeah, it's two of them that are right there within a very short distance that someone would have access to. You can go to them physically in person, and you're below the ground. And those technically connect into the plaza, the other tunnels that we know that are on the edge of Dallas and Fort Worth, over in that area, we know they more than likely connect to that crazy labyrinth that's over there, which you can still go into to this day. That stuff's fully open.
Yeah, you can.
But the stuff that's over there where JFK was assassinated in that little plaza area, that I know that there are two at least that you could still get into right now. I believe the third potential access point is basically sealed off, and I don't know if you can actually get into that anymore. It's been a while since I've gone over there and tried to see if, hey, can you get into this? Last time I had ever seen where that entrance was, it looked like they had full on sealed it off. Like there's not even a door. It looks like they bricked it up like legitimate cement. you know, they like they made it so you're not getting in unless you got a sledgehammer or a jackhammer to smash that stuff down. And that wouldn't surprise me if that stuff was utilized in this whole thing, because that would be literally perfection. I mean, it's the best way to navigate the area, especially if you were to play in almost any theory, really. Like everything from multiple shooter theory to it didn't really matter who was behind it at that point. If we're talking about just who the shooter was, not an entity, just like the men on the ground who made the action happen, how they were able to get away without being seen or known about. That would be the most ideal way to do it. Out of sight, out of mind.
And that brings me to the magic bullet theory, right? To where the bullet hit JFK in the neck and then hit Connolly, who should have, if he was in the right position, been over about 7 inches to the left, and that would ricochet to his wrist. But then they found the pristine bullet that wasn't damaged at all.
Yeah, which
how does that come into play if there's only one shooter? Did he hit the exact spot twice and it just kept going? Like,
yeah, no, it's ridiculous. In fact, do you have any thoughts on that? I have a thing I want to say about the magic bullet, but I'd rather let you guys or let you
Take
talk
over.
about some stuff. Skip.
The magic bullet theory, Dr. Cyril Weck called it the sine qua non of the Warren Commission report. I can't spell that for you. Sine qua non. Without the magic bullet theory, there is no Warren report.
That's right.
There is no single shooter. The entire thing, 900 pages of the report, 26 published volumes of so-called evidence, it all hinges on the magic bullet theory. Now, this is a thing that I get into a lot on the TikTok channel. First of all, I have a lot of, shall we say, there are ex-military types and other gun enthusiasts, and I don't know if this is a topic that you'll want to cut out for later. One of the things that you cannot talk about on TikTok is the weapon.
Really?
That isn't no. Yeah.
Really?
And
we can talk about it here.
We can talk about
Feel
it here.
free. Feel free.
Yeah, talk about all you want.
Every time that I'll talk about it like this. Every time that I talk about it on TikTok, those videos are struck, taken down, or whatever. I have had to avoid that topic. The Mannlicher Carcano, an old World War II surplus bolt action rifle, is supposedly the link to Oswald. There's a few problems with that, and then Oswald takes the time after a fatal, according to the Warren Commission report, Oswald takes the time to hide the rifle behind boxes in the corner of the school book depository, but not pick up the 3 shell casings on the floor or the paper bag that supposedly he brought the weapon in with. Okay, so that's weird. Okay. And then secondly, the very best timing on the 3 shots that they've been able to come up with based on the Zapruder film, and much has been made about the Zapruder film and the timing of it. But the best that anybody has ever been able to come up with for timing is just under 8 seconds.
Wow.
From shot 1 to shot 3. And then And there's a lot made about marksmanship. Oswald was a Marine marksman. Okay, but not a very good one. He just barely qualified. There's that. Okay, and then you have ex-military people, actual Marines, hunters, gun enthusiasts that come on my channel and say, I've been to Dealey Plaza. I've looked through the sixth floor window. Anybody, any Marine could have made that shot. And I have other people that go, no way, no way they make that shot from the sixth floor with the target moving away from, no way that
You
happens.
didn't actually have a vantage point. There was no line of sight. So it's
Well,
literally
there was,
yeah, it's ridiculous.
there was a light post, and people say that the first bullet struck it. There was a live oak tree
Mm-hmm.
that was definitely in the field of vision. But here's the thing: the first shot misses. So
Mm-hmm.
before we even get to the magic bullet theory, we have the magic shooter theory. It's
Mm-hmm.
like if you have the most time to line up that shot. Now I'm familiar with rifles and I grew up with them, and I have at least a little bit of experience enough to know that the first shot, especially for a Marine marksman, which people want to make a big deal that Oswald was, the first shot would have always been the most accurate.
Absolutely right.
And that working the bolt of the action and then redrawing a bead through the scope twice and hitting the target both times in 8 seconds is that to me lacks credibility.
You make a very valid
Even
point when talking about Oswald shooting from the window and leaving the firearm, leaving the casings, leaving the bag. If he is a U.S. Marine and a communist at that, who is attempting to cover up what he has done and hide what he has done, there's no way he would be leaving evidence like that behind.
Yeah.
Especially if you are trying to assassinate a president, you shoot, your one shot you take, and then you run.
And I want to add another detail to the marksman thing, since we're talking about it, is that uh, unfortunately I've tried to correct people that I know personally in my life when we do talk about the JFK stuff and then the rifle that was used and then all this stuff, and then all of a sudden they always bring up how he was a marksman, Marine Corps. And I just told them, I said, there's a massive difference between being a marksman and a sniper, right?
Yes.
A marksman is just you had to pass a bare minimum requisite in
Yep.
order to be in the Marine Corps. You have to be everyone is required to be a marksman. So if you can't pass your shooting test with a rifle, which by the way, the shooting test is not shooting a moving target. It's literally shooting a target at X amount of range. You don't have to fire so many shots off in a certain sequence in a matter of time and keep it in a particular cluster. No, that's not how the test goes. You literally have to hit the test, the target X amount of times, and there's not necessarily a time limit, and it's in a controlled environment where you're able to breathe and relax.
Yep.
It's not a live narrative.
So let's clarify that, right?
So-
He's getting the marksman requirements, which is a standard mandatory task by the U.S. Marines, and he barely passed that.
Yeah.
So-
I have had, and this is not to be again anything against anything with the Marine Corps. I'm very pro-military. I come from a family of family members that were in the Marine Corps. I grew up in a very militaristic kind of environment ish as a kid. Because my dad was in the military at one point, and then my uncle was in the military at one point. Like it's there, and I can tell you right now that I have shot rifles with Marines, just Marines in general. I have friends who are in the Marine Corps, and I shoot far better than them because they didn't do tack runs, nothing like that. They just, and so it's like if you're able to actually go and witness that and be with like someone shooting a rifle, especially someone who's in the Marine Corps, or out of the Marine Corps, and all they are is a marksman, yeah, they're gonna be great at hitting that target. But the problem is that you put them into a live environment and they've never seen combat before, all that stuff. I outshoot a lot of my friends who are former Marines, and when they're in Marine Corps, I am far better than they are.
And so, but I mean,
so it's like nothing about it adds up. It's too much.
There's a few points as well, because the firearm he was using was a really inaccurate firearm as that. And I've shot in several bolt action rifles in my time, and trying to go as fast as possible, getting back reloaded, rebeaded, getting ready to shoot again. It does not take 8 seconds or what was that, with 3.5 seconds a shot? That's incredibly fast.
Yeah, especially with it being a bolt action. You know.
Any
So
thoughts on that, Skip?
But
Sorry.
yeah, no, all valid. But let me ask you a question. Uh, Oswald is a Marine marksman. He has supposedly come up with this. He's hatched this plan on his own. He has ordered a mail order rifle to a post office box, the paper trail of which can obviously be linked to him, instead of walking into any sporting goods store in Texas and buying a gun which can never be traced. And then he picks the Mannlicher Carcano out of the plethora of
Yep.
available guns there.
mhm.
That doesn't make sense. But here's the question I've always had: the Mannlicher Carcano clip holds 6 rounds, yet he's only got 4 in there.
Huh.
Why is he going to this planned event with 4 rounds and then no other rifle ammunition is found anywhere among any of his possessions? These were the last 4 bullets he owned, and so it wasn't a full clip. So there's something about that that doesn't make sense to me either. But that's all leading up to the actual magic bullet theory.
Mhm.
When you get into discussions with the people on my channel, the first thing that they rely upon for the magic bullet to make sense is the idea that Connolly, sitting in the jump seat, was actually inset inside the limousine from, in other words, I'm not sure how to do this on the camera. But JFK's in the back here and Connolly's in front here and slightly in.
Yes.
Okay. If you kind of get what I'm saying here.
Mhm.
Yet the actual pictures of the day and the actual pictures of the limo don't support that. And by the way, I have another tangent to go down on the number of people who swear that they only remember 4 people being in the car. But I swear, but that's an entire different segment.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's nuts. Okay, when you look at the actual photos of the day and you see Connolly's arm resting on the side of the door, just like JFK's, and you say to you, and then you look at the photos of the limo and you see, the pictures of when you really look at the limo and you see the drivetrain going down the middle of the limousine such that there's no way that these jump seats folded up, right? So
Mhm.
that the people could get in the car. The idea that the jump seat was far enough inside for the magic bullet to have made 7 wounds in 2 people, that's a bunch of nonsense. But there's more problems than that, okay? First shot misses, all right? That's pretty widely accepted. It's a curb, blanks off a chunk of concrete, hits James Tague in the face, leaving a blood mark, a little scratch. He's standing under the underpass, or the triple overpass. So there's the first casualty, first shot, first casualty, misses.
Mhm.
Based on the Zapruder film, we know that it was the second shot, or what people call the second shot, that actually hit Kennedy next. So we know that the first one missed. We know that the second one hit Kennedy in the back.
Mhm.
Then we start going off on, well, how many different shots there could there have been? Because according to the Warren Commission, the bullet that hits Kennedy in the back also comes out his neck and then goes into Connolly, and then it goes off the rails from there.
Yes.
Okay, I seven wounds. Back wound of Kennedy, neck wound of Kennedy, back wound of Connolly, front wound of Connolly, through the wrist of Connolly and into the leg of Connolly, and comes out pristine. There's a bunch of issues with that.
Mhm.
The first of which is and if you guys understand rifles at all, you understand
Mhm.
ammunition, and you understand full jacketed ammunition with a lead core. And then you start talking about the pristine bullet and how when you actually look at it, okay, yeah, it's not perfectly pristine. It's definitely warped. And there's a small amount of lead. When you look at this really closely, there's a small of the lead core that is extruded on the
Mhm.
bottom of it. There's a nick on the top. The nick is actually from the FBI taking a sample
Samples, yep.
of the bullet. So that wasn't caused by the shooting itself. But the amount of lead found in Connolly alone ends up being more than what is missing from the total weight of an unfired Mannlicher Carcano bullet. So we got some problems there.
Whoa,
We
wait, I've
know
never heard of that before.
we know that Connolly went to his grave with lead still in his wrist.
Mm-hmm.
And the lead that came out when you look at the lead that was the X-rays of his leg, the lead that was left in his leg and came out of his wrist ends up equaling more than the total weight of the supposed bullet that did it. So we got some problems there.
Yep.
Wait, say that again. The lead that was left in Conley weighed more
Yep.
than the bullet that was found?
No, not the bullet. The sample that they took.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
The total of the lead fragments taken from Connolly equals more than the amount of lead that could possibly be missing from CE 399, the Warren Commission exhibit, commonly known as the magic bullet.
Yep.
Wow, so that presumes that they just grabbed a random bullet and damaged it and said this is what they used.
There is a video that I always tell people to go watch that is literally disproves the magic bullet video or theory immediately. And I always tell people, I go, hey, go to YouTube, look up ballistics gel and watch rounds go into ballistic gel where they test it. And you watch people, because I've shot ballistics gel numerous times because I used to shoot guns all the time and do TAC courses, the works. And I can tell you right now, you go watch that video, when you see any round, even a 22, like a little 22 long rifle, very small round, it goes in the ballistics gel, and then you look at the look at the round after it goes in the ballistics gel. It is mangled. It still mangles itself. Now, it may not be as mangled as it getting shot into a tree, but the level of how much it gets mushed and crushed and just messed up from going into the ballistics gel, it doesn't look anywhere near pristine, not even close. That right there, that is just concrete, 100% irrefutable evidence that the whole magic bullet theory of it going into ricocheting up through the body and all this bull crap,
because that means it's bones,
hitting
right?
bone. Yeah, because that ballistics gel is basically just a representation of like the equivalent of shooting into a human body, but into flesh, not bone and dense, traveling through muscle tissue, the works, and it comes out almost 100% pristine. Get the F out of here. You are so
insane.
full of crap. It is ridiculous. It's asinine to even throw the fact that anyone believes anything with that bullet being the actual round that did all of this. You are not just ill-informed, but you're wildly ignorant. And you know nothing about guns and what happens with rounds or even how they work when they get fired out of a shell casing within a chamber of a gun. You know nothing. So that right there, that was just watching a ballistics gel video of people shooting it with any round. It doesn't matter. 50 cal, that's the exception, just because there's nothing left of the ballistics gel.
So Skip, let me ask you: were there any bystanders who counted how many shots were taken? Because we know of 3, right? Do you know if there were any more taken?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, well, currently, I think when I really stop and think about it, what I'm left with, there had to be at least one more shot. And House Select Committee on Assassinations did this audio analysis, which later turned out to be incorrect, in which they identified multiple shots as recorded through a motorcycle officer's stuck radio. And then they come to realize that, well, he wasn't actually in the area when that happened, so it could not possibly have been
Wow.
gunshots.
Mhm.
But I have always said, when people say there's witnesses that heard three, that heard four, um, one of the things that is brought up is that there are witnesses who talk about the cadence of the firing, uh, and so there, if you're operating a bolt action rifle, as long as we're on the topic of operating the rifle, expect in 8 seconds that you would hear pop being the sound of the first shot, bolt, pop, bolt, pop. And what people heard, some witnesses heard instead, and went on record as saying, was that that wasn't it at all, that it was pop and pop, pop,
Oh.
which would sort of, it would probably speak against the ability of someone being able to work the bolt that fast. The commission simply ignored the witnesses that it wanted to. Whatever didn't fit the narrative. There were plenty of people that weren't called to testify. Back on the magic bullet, just for a second, and we can go any direction you want. But um, so the pristine bullet, while not completely pristine, is way too pristine to have gone through JFK. And
Mhm.
then people want to talk about tumble and yaw on bullets. Goes into Connolly's back and shatters his fifth rib, uh, and comes out Connolly's front and goes through his wrist, which is holding his white Stetson hat. Uh, and Connolly's a big guy, right?
Yeah.
That's a big bone, and it's gone through it. And then still has velocity to basically make a superficial wound in his leg, his left leg. So, you know, somehow Connolly's magically lined up for all that to happen at the same time. That's not what you see at all in the Zapruder film. And that's an entire segment, too, is the alteration of the Zapruder film. But just on the magic bullet, these same people want you to believe that the same ammunition shatters into two fragments in Kennedy's skull. And we know that the autopsy x-rays of this Kennedy skull show a trail of lead. We know that they find two fragments in the back of the limo from the same type of ammunition that went through two bodies and came out pristine. That the one that entered his skull broke into 100 pieces and left lead traces in the skull, which we'll never really know because the brain went missing, right? The whole
Yeah.
autopsy was botched. That's
Mhm.
that's another half hour right there. Uh, so anyway, there's a ding in the chrome of the windshield on the inside of the car. There's witnesses and photos of damage to the windshield of the limo. All of this done by two bullets, according to the Warren Commission report. So yeah, it's hogwash.
So yeah, let's
I don't know.
let's skip over to the Warren Commission. Let's get over to that now. The
Sure.
individuals who were a part of that, one of them, you mentioned his name earlier, Alan Dulles. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
he was fired by JFK previous to being hired onto the Warren Commission because of his actions in the Bay of Pigs and how he is using corrupt usage of his power to overthrow government and overthrow these other issues in the world and covert operations. And then he's put on the commission of to decide how he was killed and what happened in this on November 22nd, 1963. Do you have any input you want to add into the Warren Commission and how it was botched and meant to deceive the American people?
Yeah, ridiculous, right? Dulles was there, in my opinion, to protect the interests of the CIA, which he, as you said, had recently been fired of. That's weird right from the beginning, right? Kennedy is mad at Dulles, and the CIA feels like they lied to him, that they set up, they lied about having a plan to assassinate Castro. They definitely did. And then he felt hornswoggled into, let's pick a different word than horns. He
Hornswoggle. I like
was,
that.
he, nobody's going to know what that means. He was deceived into the Bay of Pigs action, and then at the last minute refuses to provide air cover. It pisses a lot of people off, including the CIA. So he's mad at the CIA. Um, he fires Dulles, and he would have gone on to fire others. And one of the major things that he did was sign an executive order in which he said that covert operations would now be the purview of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and not the CIA.
Hmm.
He's famously quoted as, planning to, and it's sometimes misattributed, but he's famously quoted as promising to break up the CIA. CIA, as I said earlier, really functioned as extra governmental. That is to say, no accountability.
Mm.
And they were used to, from the days of being the OSS until Truman actually forms the CIA. CIA sort of enjoyed this, above the board, no accountability, ability to do whatever they want, including a bunch of different covert operations. I know you have a video on MK Ultra. MK Ultra was real. And that was just one example. And Oswald was a small-time player with, for both the FBI and the CIA. The CIA had a lot to cover up. Anyway, that's where the deception began. And the Warren Commission conveniently left a bunch of things out. The most egregious of which was a lot of witness testimony that did not fit the narrative. But they published 26 volumes, basically counting on the American people not to read all that stuff. To really, and no one has. I mean, most people haven't. You can get an entire set of 26 volumes of the Warren Commission on eBay for about $100. So they're out there, but nobody's ever going to read on it. Well, that's exactly what they were counting on. The Katzenbach memo basically declares that Johnson should appoint this presidential commission because the stated intent in that memo was to make sure that alternate theories didn't come up. We wanted to downplay the idea that this could have been a conspiracy. The public needs to be satisfied that Oswald acted alone, because this is going to lead us into war, whatever, all the different reasons. But that was the stated purpose of the Warren Commission. I think Lee Harvey Oswald comes to trial today. There's not enough evidence to convict him.
Yeah, that's
my thought on
yeah, and and in the Warren committee, they also just conveniently left out. Not I know you touched on like the witness testimonies and the like intelligence ties that Oswald kind of was affiliated with, but then also the fact that how the CIA and the mafia have links to all this together, and which was basically like the CIA with the anti-Castro, the Cuban exiles and like the organized crime that was all intertwined in that. They just conveniently left all that out.
Yes,
And
they
that
did.
is that is like the fact that they left that out. That's one of the largest red flags for me. Other than the other ones, like don't get me wrong, they're all big red flags.
Because
this was just in your face. Like it's just
Because the
Anyways.
individual who assassinated Lee Harvey Oswald was a part of the underground mafia scene, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
He had ties with underground clubs and underground peddling with the mafia.
Yeah. Yeah. And another thing, I know you had mentioned, Skip, our MK Ultra episode. I don't remember if we touched on it in the episode or not, if we dropped Lee Harvey Oswald's name.
I don't
But
think we did.
Lee Harvey Oswald's name actually comes up, and you can see it says Harvey. It says Harvey Oswald, but then the Lee part is blacked out, it's redacted in these FOIA documents. But his name is in in two. His name gets referenced twice in the FOIA documents for MK Ultra that do exist still that they did not burn. So that should be
That's a red flag.
why would he be getting listed in the MK Ultra FOIA documents? That doesn't make any sense. Like, yeah.
Well,
So
yeah. So I haven't studied MK Ultra in depth. I was early on, and like I said, I have changed positions over time from being an Oswald did it alone person to Oswald was exactly what he said he was. He was a patsy. And there's a lot of things about Oswald's behavior leading up to and immediately after November 22nd that point to him not actually understanding 100% that was going on. And I think here's an example of how I sometimes go down a side path
Oh, we love him here.
we love
on
him.
my JFK TikTok account is that what am I going to do for an encore? And I jokingly have said, well, the 60th anniversary of the assassination of RFK. That's June 1968. So that's 4 years from now. And I'll just start another TikTok account that is just about the conspiracy to assassinate RFK. Now, I told you at the outset that I was not a conspiracy theorist, uh, in that I don't buy into every single crazy thing that's out there. But I'm starting to think if MK Ultra is real, that's one of the things that the CIA wanted to hide. For sure, it's probably wrapped up in some of the remaining documents, and the remaining documents is a whole other segment that we can get into here. But I will just state to you right now, because we talk about MK Ultra, is that I am starting to think that Sirhan, who failed to get parole yet again, 55 years later or whatever, uh, was perhaps a patsy also and a victim of MK Ultra. He doesn't remember being there. He doesn't remember pulling the trigger. If he does, he thought he was just target shooting. But
Was
there are
was Sirhan
many
the
things.
RFK assassinator?
No, he was. Yeah. He was for RFK, Robert F. Kennedy.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
Well, guys, no,
He was the one
actually, no.
convicted for it. Sorry, I'm talking about on the public sphere. That's who is listed as who they convicted him.
Correct.
That doesn't mean he was actually the one who did it.
Yes.
I'm just saying. You just asked, so I
Oh,
was answering. Sorry.
again, rabbit trail. But let me just ask you guys what you think. Um, Ambassador Hotel, RFK. Again, I was 1 year old, so this is actually, I'm a student of Dr. Cyril Weck. May he rest in peace. I don't know if you've ever seen any of his content, but he famously tells this story, and he asks the audience the question. So now I ask you guys,
Mhm.
how far away in the kitchen of the Ambassador Hotel? RFK's just won the nomination. He's going to be the next president. He quickly gets off the stage and starts walking to the kitchen. There's Sirhan. How far away is Sirhan from Robert Kennedy when he starts shooting?
I'm unsure.
Well,
I mean, wild guess.
50 feet.
honestly,
Now, there's a small kitchen, a hotel. Picture a hotel kitchen.
yeah. I know I'm thinking. I'm picturing in my head because I've never actually. I haven't thought about that in a long time. So I'm thinking
Okay, well, I
how
mean,
big it was.
typical responses would be, 4 feet,
Yeah,
6 feet,
I think the
6 feet.
standard common like what people or narrative that people like to throw out there is like anywhere between like 3 to 5 foot would have been the
Right.
distance, but I don't buy that. Now,
How many shots were fired?
honestly, I don't remember off the top of my head how many shots were fired.
13.
13.
What?
13.
Oh
How
my
many
gosh.
bullets did Sirhan's revolver hold?
That was
Probably
only,
6.
I'd say that was only 5
Eight.
or 6.
8. 8.
Mm. Interesting.
8-shot revolver.
Interesting.
Guys, uh, it's right when you talk about believing what the government tells you, or or questioning what the government said. A lot of people, many people don't know this. Is if my parents, boomers, for example, would tell you that yeah, Sirhan did it. He was the one. Nobody questions that. He's been in jail this entire time. But it's actually right there in the government's own report. The shot that killed Robert F. Kennedy was in the back of his head at a downward angle at a distance of 1 to 1.5 inches.
Oh my God.
I'll say that again. Back of the head, downward angle, 1 to 1.5 inches. It's there in the
Mhm.
autopsy.
Yeah, but that don't add up either.
I'll be the first to say I have never actually investigated the Robert F. Kennedy assassination. I did not know that there was 13 shots being fired. That
And
is,
and the fatal shot was supposedly like basically point blank range at the back of his
Right.
head back here, from like you were saying, like an inch and a half away, and that doesn't make any sense with the narrative of how it transpired. That's why there's a lot of people who think or suggest that potentially there was, Sirhan was not alone in this, and even if he was actually there, he obviously was in some form of manipulated state and not of
Yes.
a sound mind.
well, that means we got to keep
So
RFK Jr. close at hand, make sure he doesn't get
I
the next
know, right? I
assassination,
love
huh?
that man. We got to keep him safe. Keep him safe.
Just to say, MK Ultra is real, and
Yes.
Oh, it is.
that's a
Yes, it
whole
is.
other, it's a whole other TikTok account, right? The RFK assassination, um, but I obviously I'm satisfied enough to know that something's fishy about that, right? Like we just accept the common government push narrative. And when you really look closely at it, it's not all it seems to be. Anyway, that was a rabbit
Well,
trail.
that's a whole
Sorry,
nother
but I
episode.
will.
We'll have to bring you on for that episode too. Talk about that.
Well, I like I said, it's just a rabbit
Well,
trail because it is for me. It's mostly about JFK.
yeah, can I throw something in there about just the Kennedys in general, because there is everyone already knows, like, just hearing about RFK, and then obviously JFK assassination, all these things that happen. What people don't talk about very heavily is actually Joseph Kennedy Jr. And when he was a Navy pilot, so he was being talked about how he was going to be the next president of the United States when he got out of the military. And all of a sudden, there was a situation. This is during World War II, and there's like this type of bunker that was built into the ground that they needed to get rid of, right? Because it was housing these, basically these bombs and things that were being used. And unfortunately, how the bunker was built, the bombs, the bombing runs that were happening, the type of bombs we were using was not penetrating and blowing up this bunker. Have you heard about this, Skip?
I
Okay,
have not.
so and the reason I bring it up is because it has to do with the Kennedys, and I think it's relevant because it just plays into the whole line of events leading up to JFK as well. And basically, Joseph Kennedy Jr., or Joseph P. Kennedy, he volunteered for this flight because the idea was that there was a top secret operation. The pilot who was supposed to fly the plane all of a sudden miraculously wasn't there, didn't know where he was just gone. And JPK was the only person basically present, but JPK was known for being this guy of like valor and camaraderie and like doing the right thing no matter what. And he already kind of knew about this operation since he was one of the pilots at that Navy location. And so he was like, well, this has to get done. We have to save lives. We have to do this. I volunteer to go. So the whole thing was mapped out to where they were going to get in there. And so this is going to get really wild. This is what they say, that they set up an autopilot, a remote control autopilot for a plane that another plane will control. And all that J.P. Kennedy had to do was turn on this switch. Him and his co-pilot turn on this switch. They go and activate these bombs that are in the cargo hold of this plane, like tons of explosives. And the whole plan was to fly this plane to this tunnel point, because that was the access to go into this bunker that the Nazis had. And they were going to jump out of the plane and parachute while the other pilots in the air controlled it and flew it right into this tunnel and blew up the bunker. Everything about that sounds so dumb. And the fact that they claimed that they had remote controlled autopilot technology back in World War II from another plane is the dumbest thing I've ever heard as well. So that's literally how it goes. So the narrative is, this is the story. He goes, they're flying, and the whole thing that they were supposed to do is once they hit this particular checkpoint, they radio to the other planes who are flying with them. And they say, okay, turning on the timer. It's because they were supposed to turn on a timer for these bombs, supposedly. And then they were then supposed to confirm that the autopilot, remote autopilot with Bluetooth back in the day, folks, was fully connected, and it was like they had control of the plane. So that's what they did. They checked in. People said, "Yep, I have control of your plane." And he's like, "Cool." He doesn't, they don't like grab the thing or anything. They just get up out of the pilot seats, go back, and they right when they turn on the timer, they explode.
What?
Yep, and the timer, yeah, and people have talked about it, like that whole setup that they had in this plane. The timer wasn't even associated with the devices. Basically, whoever put this stuff in there, it's very obvious because there's like schematics on this stuff that have leaked from a long time ago. And basically, that timer was actually a dead man switch to initiate the, like, just light the bombs, ignite it. And so they did that. JPK dies. Everyone in the plane dies. Him and the co-pilot die. The other two pilots just fly away. And then you find out later, because this is way after World War II, like 10 to 15, maybe 20 years later, all of a sudden, it finally gets released that that operation wasn't even supposed to happen because they already destroyed that bunker. The Brits did. They blew up the bunker with these particular, whatever, I forgot what style bombs they were, but they were able to do these like deep penetration explosive where they embed into the ground when they hit and then they explode. They took out that bunker 2 weeks earlier. From the night of the operation. The bunker didn't even exist. So everything just lines out that, like, because JBK was highly regarded because he was like this stellar of a guy, and he was being talked about to be the next president, but his viewpoints did not line up with anything in the political spectrum, any of the organizations at the time, and there was a good chunk of people within the government who thought that he would be the downfall of our current structure. And then all of a sudden he dies in a plane that explodes, that was being controlled by Wi-Fi. Congrats. So sorry, I just wanted to throw that in there because it just plays into the Kennedys. So
so let's go on because that's actually a segue to just to relate a little bit. And I had not heard that. So it's always fascinating to me. Just as a reminder, an hour and a half ago, I hope that I stated clearly for anybody who's wondering, I'm not a conspiracy theorist in the flat earth, we never landed on the moon sense.
Yeah.
What's super fascinating to me, however, is the myriad of alternate theories that are out there. So let me just tell you, after 2 years of ostensibly creating U.S. history content, whatever the remainder of our time is, and I'll stay on here as long as you guys want.
Oh, yeah.
But let me just tell you, first, one of the most fascinating things to me about the TikTok experience, which is, as I told the story, that's how I got here. And I'm now 150,000 followers. What's just as interesting to me It's fun. It's absolutely a lot of fun. And I'm learning. I'm learning the algorithm. I'm learning what works and what doesn't. What type of content people want. What do people respond to? So that's been a journey. I am super fascinated with the statistics, the analytics of it. And I don't know if you guys look at your analytics,
Mm-hmm.
but my analytics look something like this. Of my 150,000 followers, the vast majority of them are men over 40, and even higher when you narrow it between 40 and 50, and then over 50. So, in other words, my demographic are dudes like me.
Mm-hmm.
It is 70% men and 30% women. And I don't know, again, I don't know what your analytics look like, but I
Mm-hmm.
will tell you that the reason the people that follow me and consume my content are people like me, my age group, because that makes sense, right? Like it's closer
Mm-hmm.
in time to their real lives. And there are people over 60 who are on TikTok and they don't make videos, but they do consume videos. And so these are my followers. 70% men and 30% women is also very interesting to me. That's on background. Um, you would be, and I don't have statistics for this, I just see it very commonly. The number of people in America today that believe that JFK Jr. is still alive. And in fact, there is a person on TikTok who I have now blocked because I just got tired of being tagged all the time,
Mm-hmm.
uh, who claims to be JFK Jr.
Oh God.
That
Come
Come
he's the
on.
real
on.
JFK Jr. and he was switched at birth and all this. That guy's got 400,000 followers.
Yeah, people are into some pretty dumb stuff.
I gotta look this up.
Okay, so yeah, so you can find. I can't remember what his name is, and it doesn't matter. And I'm just people when people come on to my channel with that, I'm like, I'm just hard no. Okay, here's some other things that I am hard no about, uh, especially as it relates to JFK. And I feel like I'm pretty even handed. And like I said, my the people that watch my stuff represent all sides of the political spectrum. Um, the number of people who think that the driver was the one who fired the fatal shot is astounding.
Mm-hmm.
And that theory has, in my mind, been debunked a long time ago. It has been very prevalent. It didn't originate on TikTok, but it certainly went viral on TikTok.
Oh yeah.
That idea. And when people say to me, this is a very common comment that I get, if I could just rant for a second.
No, go ahead.
And people say to me in my comments, I seen the video where the driver did it. And what they mean is they saw a TikTok video of somebody with a Zapruder film on the TV, and they see the flash of light on Roy Kellerman's head, which is sunshine reflecting off his Brill cream. Some of the younger people are not going to get these references, man.
Yeah, it's all right.
Many men wore hair product in their hair. What you see in frame 313 of the Zapruder film is the reflection of the sun off the top of Roy Kellerman's head. Bill Greer's hands are both in front of him. So you're never, ever, 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 ever going to hear me say that the driver did it with a special issue nickel plated 45 automatic that he was carrying under his right shoulder that he picks out left handed with his right hand on the wheel, turns over his shoulder and shoots JFK, who is sitting on his right, and the wound in Kennedy's head is on the right side of his head, so opposite the driver. You're never going to convince me of that. Okay, but that's super prevalent, and that's like one of the main alternate theories that are out there, and people love to come on my page. After I have read and read and read and studied and watched and studied and read and watched some more, think that they're helping me solve the case by simply saying the driver did. At this point, I think they're trolling me.
Yeah.
I can't possibly respond to all of the comments that I get or all of the messages that I get. But I have gone off on a tangent about how the. In fact, I actually uh, put a very close up zoom in on the driver on frame 313. I put that in this chat or in the whatever the general
Hmm.
Discord chat is here. Uh, and I don't know if maybe you can use that later.
Hmm.
But when you really, so people they watch the many variations, and by variations I mean different copies of the Zapruder film, and always point to frame 313, which is the fatal headshot, and say, "Watch the driver. The driver did it," because the driver definitely turns around and looks. Okay,
Hmm.
but but none of that is as crazy as the people that come on and say it was Jackie. Jackie did
What?
it.
No way.
Get out
Way
of
Jackie
town.
did it. and
Oh,
and then and then
Shots.
variations of that is it was all planned. It was a body double. It wasn't actually JFK in the car. He had a movie style blood squid, hidden under his head, and he's the one that triggered the blood. And it was all the Zapruder. Okay, the Zapruder film was altered is another thing that comes out a lot, and that's up for some legitimate debate. Okay, but the driver did it. I think that people like to feel important, and they like to demonstrate that they have knowledge that the rest of us don't, and so it sort of makes you feel good to jump into somebody's comments and say, issue this non sequitur. The driver did it, as if they are suddenly gifted with this knowledge that nobody has. But again, that theory has been out there for a while and it's been debunked many times. All right, second closest thing to that, and I'm dismissing the Jackie did it thing altogether. Okay, ridiculous. But the second most prevalent theory out there is that uh, it was actually uh, George Hickey, the Secret Service agent in the follow up car, accidentally delivers the fatal headshot himself with the AR-15 that was hidden on the floor
mm,
of the Secret Service follow-up car. That's out there a lot, and in an entire book has been in documentaries made about it, and many people have bought into this. But there's no real evidence of that either. You can talk about ballistics all you want,
yeah.
but there's no real evidence of that either. Okay, so then there's the storm drain theory, and then another very common one that I get is um, uh, that George H.W. Bush planned it all.
Wow.
That that because he people associate him and rightly so with the CIA, but George H.W. Bush didn't become the director of the CIA until 1976, and this was after he'd already served a term as congressman or whatever. He'd held public office and then became the director of the CIA. But in 1963, he was just the wealthy son of Prescott Bush and had just because of his wealth and his stature in society, and because this is the way it works. I know you guys have talked about Skull and Bones
Yep.
also. I did flip through your videos. So H.W. Bush was in Skull and Bones, and the way that works is, at the very least, once you're, once you're in Skull and Bones, you're always in Skull and Bones, and
Hmm.
these people have perpetrated the government, and it's a good old boy network, and so it's no surprise uh, that these people get into positions of power because of who they know and what club they were in when they were in college. But in 1963, uh, George H.W. Bush, he was the CEO of an oil company, right? Texas
Mm-hmm.
Oil,
Hmm.
Zapata Oil Company. Uh, Bush was Zapata Oil Company. When you start looking at that, you start saying, okay, that could be a CIA front for money laundering. The CIA is involved in there somewhere. Did George Bush, H.W. Bush, have ties to the CIA? prior to 1963? Probably. He
Mhm.
probably at least went to dinner parties with some of these people because Prescott Bush, one of the original robber barons, that's a whole thing. Um,
There was a
but
few CIA
Soviet,
leaders in Skull and Bones as well. So
Yep,
yeah,
there were.
there's no question that Skull and Bones that those people have pervaded the government. But in November 22nd, 1963, George H.W. Bush was just starting his political career. So we know for a fact that that Friday afternoon that he was actually in Tyler, Texas, and canceled a political speech that he was scheduled to make to the Kiwanis Club or Chamber of Commerce or whatever. Wasn't actually in Dallas. Did travel to Dallas later, but makes a long distance phone call from Tyler to Dallas
Mhm.
on that afternoon. He wasn't there. A number of people who say, and I should have sent this picture to you too, but you can Google it and find it easily. There's a guy, a lanky guy, leaning up against the wall in front of the Texas School Book Depository. Uh, so he's in one of the pictures of the crowd in Dealey Plaza moments later.
Mhm.
That's, and I will grant you that there is a passing resemblance to Bush, but it's not there. But people see this, and it's suggested to them that George Bush was in Dealey Plaza,
Yeah.
and he had ties to the CIA, and so 2 and 2 has to
Yeah.
equal 5 immediately. And I spend a lot of my time, I again at the beginning I said my TikTok account anymore. I make no illusions that I am not bringing out new information. It's just new to you
Mhm.
or new to the watchers, and it's
Yeah.
stuff that people didn't know before. That is the majority of what I do. It's 50% of what I do, and the other 50% is arguing with the nutcases out there who think that the driver did it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of room for content there, just in the comments and
Yeah.
responding to someone. Uh, I welcome all opinions, and if you comment on one of my videos that the driver did it, most of the time, I mean, I just don't have the time.
Mhm.
Um, but there's so much of that out there. If people have, oh, dude, I spent there was a whole this came out of nowhere because I'd run this TikTok channel for like a year and a half. We talked about, I thought, every aspect of this case. But there was a 2 or 3 day period. It's just weird how TikTok works, right? There was a 2 or 3 day period, about a month and 2 months earlier in the summer, where for whatever reason we got we got down this road, and I don't know if you. Here's an episode for idea for you: is the Mandela effect.
yes,
You know what
Yep.
the Mandela effect is?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so a lot of people use this term incorrectly, shall I say? And so and I'll talk about that. But the point of contention is people coming into my comments and arguing the most basic, obvious thing, which is, and they come on there and they literally say, "Since when are there 6 people in the car?" Because I only remember 4. There were only 4 people in the. It's been confirmed. It's been proven.
we can't listen to
I
all these
saw.
lunatics out there. It's
And then they say, "Oh yeah, it's the Mandela effect," and they're using the term improperly. Uh, the Mandela effect, as I understand it, I'm not a psychologist. The Mandela effect is simply the phenomenon of many people remembering something wrongly,
mhm.
and there are many examples of it. And in this case, uh, they have remembered wrongly that there were only 4 people in their limo. But they use Mandela effect to have a different incorrect meaning in which someone, possibly the CIA or covert governmental forces, have figured out how to go back and scrub history and they've just manipulated history,
Hmm.
uh, or or we really are living in a different timeline now. Like people live on different timelines, and yes, this group of people lives in the timeline where there were 6 people in the car, and these people live. I live in the timeline where there were 4 people in the car, and this is a whole thing. And these people vote. These are adults.
Yeah, yes. We're on the same page on
Oh, I
that.
love plenty of content out there if you have the time to, and I don't, to respond to all of these alternate facts, alternate theories, alternate timelines. Um, so it's good for engagement, but it's not good for actually studying
For
what really
education.
happened and
Yeah.
trying
So
to understand
I've got two
the history.
things. I got two things I want to add. One is about H.W. Bush. So so leading up to doing this episode with you and having you on as a guest and us talking about this, because I'm a huge fan of your channel, by the way. He actually is the one. Evan over here is the one who actually found your channel,
Yep.
and he was like, "You got to check this out." And so I started watching your little TikToks and things like that, and I was just like, "Awesome."
Yeah, it's right up our alley.
Oh, it's right up our alley.
Right.
But while I was like, redoing my research, because I've researched the JFK assassination a few different times over the past several years, and leading up to this episode, I found on my computer was an old file of all my previous research for the JFK assassination. And so I went through it this past week, which I forgot how much I had. I had so much. And one of the things was it was H.W. Bush. I had a whole file folder about that. And it's a pretty small contents what I had inside. But one of the main things I had was the fact of why the theory of H.W. Bush being connected even got sparked was because George or H.W. Bush claimed, he claimed that he was not part of the CIA at the time. That was like kind of like the official statement, and he didn't join the CIA till way later or whatever, like, however many years it was. But the reason why that even a narrative of that got out there was because this is actually, you can go pull up this FBI memo. There are literal copies of the original memo paperwork of the FBI. It was a declassified FBI memo referencing George Bush of the CIA. Says it word for word. George Bush of the CIA.
Wow.
Literally I don't remember if it was like a couple days after the assassination happened, or it was within the first like week from the post assassination, within the first week. That memo went out. George Bush of the CIA. That was word for word, verbatim in there.
And Skip mentioned that he was in Tyler, Texas. Tyler, Texas is about a 2-hour drive from Dallas.
Yeah, 2 to 2.5, give or take.
If he had the red alert, you need to be in Dallas, he could fly there in 10 minutes. He could maybe like 20 minutes by takeoff, right?
Yeah, and even at that time, you could, even if you wanted to, you could drive. It's a 2-hour drive. That's nothing. Every Texan, that's like driving to the grocery store.
That's right.
Like, that's normal for us. So yeah. Sorry, keep going.
So like the fact that he could have been there, which you mentioned the photo of him potentially standing against the wall. I briefly looked that up in a really quick search, and it does sort of resemble the man in
his structure,
in a structure standpoint, right? So if he canceled his meeting and then he is a part of Skull and Bones, part of CIA, or rather an initiate to the CIA, it is potential that he was there to overthrow or watch and make sure it happened.
Yeah. And the fact that HW was part of Skull and Bones Society, we know that for a fact, that he was one of the members. We already know, and it's not even circumstantial as evidence. It's legitimate. It's a fact at this point that the control and manipulation, the ability and power at the end of his fingertips on a whim to do whatever he wanted to do. Like, since he was connected in the Skull and Bones and they were in everything across the board, every single form of agency, even mafia, even the organized crime they were involved with. Skull and Bones. And there's like legitimate documentation out there that anyone can look up and it's for a fact. This isn't altered stuff. This is original documentation. You know, he could have easily, if we were going to entertain the theory that H.W. Bush was involved 100%, that's just going off of that narrative, making sure to clarify that. He could have easily, he had the power to make something happen.
Yeah.
Easily. And especially if he was supposed to be in a meeting and he canceled it, or he claimed he was in a meeting doing this, or whatever it was, he could have easily, with the power and influence that he had at his fingertips and he was connected into, have someone mark him there even though he's not there. It's easy to have an alibi when money talks.
That's absolutely
That's why
right.
I always tell everyone of any situation, if there's any form of finance involved or someone who's going to benefit in any form of financial way, follow the money. Like legit, and you got to watch out for the fake money trails, because there are fake money trails out there. But you find the source of that money and you follow it like it's and look for every single little breadcrumb. You're going to notice it starts deviating in the places. They're like, why is it going there? And then all of a sudden you start to connect the dots. So follow the money. That's a
So
important
I'm
lesson.
I'm a believer that Lee Harvey Oswald is relatively innocent in the regard of the assassination. That the CIA or the FBI were in ties with the mafia to then assassinate the now president, who was holding term for 3 years and is on his tour run to then go to a second election term. So they took him out in order to propagate fear and potentially have LBJ, who ended up being corrupt and scandalous in his own right, take over the U.S. government and manipulate it to what we have today.
Yeah.
The
Sorry, go ahead.
the fact that the documents surrounding the CIA and JFK's assassination and the rightful attempts of what happened has been redacted and held in standpoints for 60 years now, is a not only fear mongering, it is a form of MK Ultra and control in its own right. So they're trying to change the history, change the mindset, change all these things to where we don't think that the government killed former President JFK.
Yeah.
I wonder when they will ever release those documents.
They won't. They're going to keep
Okay.
redacting and keep going.
So happy you brought this up.
Mhm.
I'm so happy you brought up the files. So let's just say, and I just quickly look to try to see if I could find 2029. Okay. So when people this is another very prevalent comment that I get is we would know the whole truth if they would release the rest of the files. And here's where we get a little political, a little tiny bit.
It's okay.
Yeah, that's all right.
You'll see what I mean. The files, the files that the secret redacted files that people refer to isn't obviously it's the Warren Commission. You can buy all 26 volumes of that on eBay. The files that are sealed away, were sealed away, were the House Select Committee on Assassinations. They're the ones that concluded that Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of the conspiracy. Though they hesitated to go much beyond Oswald was definitely involved, but there probably was a second shooter. At the end of the day, that's what they concluded. And they're also the ones that went deeper than the Warren Commission and
What was the entity
generated
called
all
again? What was the entity called again?
House Select Committee on Assassinations.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, I just wanted to say it again. That's all.
It was formed in 1976, concluded in 1977. You can check me on those dates, but late 70s. Okay. So that's when and that was after they were looking at JFK. They were also looking at RFK and MLK, and that's why it was called the Committee on Assassinations. Because people were like, there's too much weird about this. At the end of it, they conclude that Kennedy probably was assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. All right, 1977. It's that committee in Congress that thinks that the American people really can't handle all of the truth, and that these documents need to be sealed away to the year 2029, which is about 60 years,
Yeah.
50. Do the math on that. 77 to 2027, I guess that would be 70 years. 2029 is the date.
That's
Okay.
yeah.
So then what happens? Not a whole lot. We don't see all the documents. 1991, Oliver Stone's movie comes out. Kevin Costner, Joe Pesci, um, big name stars. 3.5 hours long. And in that movie, JFK, that movie is about Jim Garrison, the district attorney of New Orleans, launched his own investigation in 1967. And he was the only one to bring anyone to trial for conspiracy. We all know how that turned out. The movie was a blockbuster in 1991. And people lost their ever loving minds when that movie came out. Um, and it was, of course, downplayed as fan fiction in media, but the net result, Oliver Stone ends up testifying before Congress again as a result. He goes on a year-long promotion tour of that movie. Okay, big Hollywood movie, but so many people, myself included, became re-interested in the case that they bring Oliver Stone to testify, and as a result, in 1992, Congress establishes the Assassination Records and Review Board, the ARRB.
Mm-hmm.
You can look that up. And they pass the JFK Records Act of Congress. It's a law. The law from Congress states that the president, whoever is president, will do all that he can to expedite the release of the JFK files. 14,000 documents, 13 million pages, sealed away until 2029. Undone with the JFK Records Act in 1992. But it left a lot of flexibility in the timeline as able. The CIA's contention on documents all along has been that they needed to protect sources and methods.
Mm-hmm.
We know sources are people and methods are what they say they are. We don't want you to know what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So for the good of keeping people safe, sources safe, other CIA informants and people related to the CIA can't release these documents. But the documents started being released in 1992 as a result of that law.
Mm-hmm.
Every presidential administration since 1992, which included in 92, it was George H.W. Bush, right? Check me on that.
Yeah, it was H.W. Bush in 92.
Okay. Obligated to start releasing these files, and they start releasing them. And files are released every year, slowly at first. In 2017, and President Trump says, I'm going to release all of them.
Yep.
People are super excited about this. Researchers, and I hadn't at that time, wasn't as deep into it as I am now. But I was aware, I was interested. So Trump does in fact expedite the release of more documents, and we get a huge dump of documents in 2017. It's not all of them.
Yeah.
And when asked about it, Trump has freely said, he's on record as saying, Mike Pompeo came to me and begged me not to release the rest of these documents. Yep. Pompeo, CIA director at the time.
Yep.
So whether or not that's actually true, I'm willing to believe it, but I do believe that what happened was in 2017, the CIA directly or indirectly still influenced the president. Remember, Trump is acting as if this is his idea, but there's a law. He's obligated to follow the law, and every president before him has been obligated to follow the law. So it's not new. It's just I'm going to kick it in the butt and accelerate it, and we're going to dump out these big documents. Okay, they did it. 17,000 uh, more documents. And also check me on the total number of documents that we're talking about, because on the one hand, it's 13 million pages, but that's across all documents. And double check me on what I'm about to say next. It's
You say total? So the total number of documents that were released in 2017, or total number of documents that have been released in general?
the only thing that I'm going to swear to is the 17,000 documents released in 2017. I don't know what the ratio is, what the total number of. I keep seeing different numbers, but I'm sure that this is on record somewhere. What the total number of documents and the total number of pages was.
There's 19,045 documents.
Wow.
Okay.
And then now there's, as of today, total released over 5 million pages of documents have been released. And unfortunately, out of those 5 million, a good majority of them are redacted and redundant information.
So what we do know now is that the remaining number of documents. Okay, and so Trump does this, and then he's stopped at the last minute by who? The CIA. And then President Biden basically does the same thing, and he brick walls, and he effectively he writes a memo that says, "Okay, look, this is over." He washes his hands of the whole thing, and he throws it back to the agencies, National Archives, CIA, FBI, and says it's up to them to release the rest of these things. The CIA is still being protective of the remaining. I think it's 4,500 documents. So the question I get all the time is, what's in those remaining documents? And my answer is that there are still, believe it or not, a few people left alive that the CIA might be protecting. Now, if the number is getting smaller, right? But there's a few people, but more than that, the CIA still, although it wasn't the powerhouse that it was in the 60s, the CIA still has undue influence. So it's not hard for me to believe that Pompeo would say to Trump, "Please don't do this. It'll create a firestorm." And I'm not above believing that Trump is, when he tells that story, is exaggerating a little. But the bottom line is the CIA got to him, and probably got to Biden also. And in that sense said, you can't release the rest of the documents for the following reasons. But let me ask you, for those who defend the Warren Commission, and for those who say, Oswald, that all of you are conspiracy nuts and that Oswald acted alone. So why are there 13 million pages of documents?
Yeah. That's a lot of information to say that Oswald did it. It's a lot of information to go around trying to exonerate everything else besides Oswald.
Yeah. And then plus the documents that have not been released yet, it doesn't mean it's like, I think I've seen the conversations take place with people where they go, "Oh, well, the document, like they're under, like for some reason they're under this instinctual idea that when they're releasing these documents, they're releasing them in chronological order." And it's like, no, they're just releasing anything that would not incriminate anyone. That's it.
Who is alive,
or or whatever. I was like, I guarantee at this point the remaining documents are so fundamental and have such pertinent information in it that they don't want, that's like all they have left to release, and they're like, no, we're not letting this out. And I think that the whole narrative of basically, oh, hey, they're trying to protect people who are like whistleblowers or protect some informant. I don't believe they're trying to protect anyone for any good graces. I think they're trying to protect themselves because they were highly involved and they
Yeah,
were
yeah,
behind the murder of JFK.
It makes me want to know
Yeah.
what
yeah.
Hoover was doing leading up to the
Yeah.
assassination.
On
Where
that
was he the past month?
Yeah. On that note, um, I want to take like a 5 minute intermission, like a bathroom break.
Sure.
You good with that? Cool.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and do that, and then we'll get back together here in about 5 minutes. Jump back into this stuff. There was something that you were wanting to talk about real quick right before we started hit record.
Well,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
on the break, I went and got my beloved Coke Zero,
Yes, sir.
and um, checked the TikTok account because it's just a knee jerk reaction now.
Mm-hmm.
And 30,000 additional views just since 8 o'clock this morning on not the last, but the second to last video that I put up, in which I talk about uh, Jackie jumping out of the back of the car. And I post just the Zapruder film, and we should talk about that before we get done.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start talking about it. The Zapruder film, shot by Abraham Zapruder with his beloved state of the art Bell and Howell camera. State of the art for the time. He actually didn't even bring it to work with him that morning. He actually went home to get it and bring it back in order to take video of the motorcade at 12:30 coming through Dealey Plaza.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that film is talked about a lot. It is 26 and a half seconds long in total.
Mm-hmm.
It's an 8 millimeter film. It was wind up. It used a spring, a mainspring, to operate the shutter, and the film passed through. It was exposed at the rate of uh, about 18.3, 18 and a fraction frames per second.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to understand that the total length of the film is about 6 feet, a little bit taller than me, and it's 30 seconds. So all of that to say, these frames are really tiny. The video, the last two videos I put up talk about this, and I was only talking about 6 seconds out of the total of 26 seconds, in which I try to demonstrate that Jackie is trying to climb on the trunk of the car uh, to retrieve a piece of JFK's skull. Which, yeah, again, on TikTok, you have to be very careful about how
Yep.
About how you word
gory
things.
you get.
Word things, what you show on screen, you have to be careful
So
about that.
I've gotten better at suggesting what it is I'm suggesting without actually saying the words. But I only, this video was directed to the sort of towards the crowd that thinks that the driver did it, and goes on to say that Jackie did it and she was hiding the weapon, or Jackie knew that the driver did it and was trying to get out of the car. But the vast majority of people and the vast majority of the comments on that video, and this is the one that's going viral right now.
Yep.
It's 30,000 views in the last 3 hours. Since we've been on this, um, they understand that what Jackie was actually doing was trying to retrieve a piece of JFK's skull, which she then ended up carrying into Parkland Hospital and handling to a doctor. But this is an example of a thing that is widely misunderstood. Uh, the most recent video prior to recording this, I compare 3 of the 9 different home movie cameras that were in Dealey Plaza that day. And Zapruder is by far the most well known, but there are others, and the second most famous one is the one shot by Orville Nix, and it's shot from the other side of Dealey Plaza. And it was confiscated and finally ultimately returned. Um, One of the interesting things about the Zapruder film is the discussion about why so many people believe that the film was altered or staged. if not, probably less so staged and more so altered. They believe that what we're seeing is an altered copy of the Zapruder film, and I want to try to correct the record on that because I do not, sitting here today, believe that the Zapruder film was altered. I believe it shows exactly what it was supposed to show. But the first thing you have to understand about it is the very nature of the technology of the time. This camera was brand new. He had gone and he just recently bought it. Zapruder had just recently bought it, and was, enjoying learning it, starting to use it, and he's shooting little, as anybody would, shooting video of his home life with his children. And of course, he's going to go get it to record the motorcade. The president's coming to town. He's coming right by our building. That's how exciting. Goes and gets the camera. The film is double eight. That is to say, 16 millimeters wide. Get a ruler, flip it to the millimeter side, and look how wide 16 millimeters is, and then realize that what you did on double eight film was record on one half of it until you were done, and then, much like a cassette tape, flip it over and record on the other half of it. So, two recordings. And in the development process, which it was developed within 3 hours of 12:30 p.m. Central Time in Dallas, the Zapruder film was developed, and then 3 copies were made. We need to understand that also. We need to understand how fast the frames are moving through the aperture and being exposed. So that's 18 frames per second.
Mm-hmm.
In 1 second of time, 18 frames have gone by. That's important to understand. When researchers started studying the Zapruder film, they started numbering them, counting them. In total, 486 frames. When people talk about altering it, they talk about missing frames, and they talk about trying to hone in on the reasons why people think it would be altered, or that the public has been shown an altered version of the film. In any case, the last video I did puts up the Zapruder film, the Orville Nix film, and the Mary Muchmore film. And these three all show Zapruder. Zapruder's on one side of the street, and then Muchmore and Nix are on the other side of the street, some distance from the motorcade on Elm Street. But they all show, in my mind, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the limo, this is a common misconception or myth put forward by the watchers of my content, that the limo did not stop, and thereby, further implicating William Greer, the driver. Many people said he was in on it. The worst you could say about Bill Greer was that he had a natural reaction. I think when he realized what was happening, his foot came off the gas. The limo was already going pretty slow at 11 miles per hour, less than the standard speed at which the Secret Service, what the Secret Service protocol was. But they had changed the route of the motorcade, and so he had just taken this stretch limo, which had 6 people in it. People made this super awkward left-hand turn. If you've ever driven a vehicle longer than a standard car, or even a standard car, you know that there's no way to make a sharp left turn without slowing way down. But a lot of people want to talk about the Zapruder film has been altered to remove the fact that the limo stopped, which there were some witnesses who said it stopped. The point of the video comparing the 3 films is that you don't see that anywhere in not just the Zapruder film, but you don't see it in the other films of the motorcade.
Yeah, I want to add something imperative to that. So, with the concept that the narrative that people say that the limo came to a stop, I can only we can only go off of what we have access to. What we can see, what we can prove to be a fact, and we are in 2024 now. There is technology now that everyone has at their fingertips where they can take a video and they can upload it, and it will analyze every aspect of that film or whatever video you upload, and it will tell you if potentially it was doctored, manipulated, changed in any form by some type of external source, and it's not the original form of the film, because the AI stuff that's out now does it extremely well. And just this past week, or it was actually yesterday, I'm sorry, I took the footage of it was like two different pieces, from two of them, and put it into one of those little AI analyzers. And this was supposed to be, and I went and got the original uploaded stock footage that I could find, and not like uploaded and then re-uploaded and then re-uploaded where people may have messed with that. And it came out and straight up said, it was like, no, nothing about this. It literally checked out 100%. Like there was nothing. It didn't even find like 0.1% that it could have been doctored, like manipulated the footage itself. It was showing that it's authentic across the board. So there's that. And then secondly, what I hate is that when people make the argument and they're like, well, there's a couple witnesses. Okay, well, there's a couple witnesses always to everything, it seems like, when it comes to
Yeah.
any form of thing out there. And that's the thing, it's a witness account. Like, if you, like, my favorite thing to do is go tell people to go, there's this brain, it's like a brain game type video, and it will have someone who goes and pickpockets people. And you're watching as the viewer, so you have the advantage. You get to watch the person doing the pickpocketing. You're not in the moment living it. You're a third-party external source. You're not even in there getting distracted by anyone. You have nothing to distract you, so you can watch it from clear as day. And this guy pickpocket people. And at the end of that video, it will ask you, it's like, hey, who did he pickpocket? And and then you give your answer, and then it goes, oh, this is who he actually pickpocketed. Wasn't anyone in the camera, but they all said that he pickpocketed this person and this person. Well, I watched his hand go in that pocket. But then when you go and rewatch the footage again and again, you see he actually didn't. And it's because, it's a moving film. Like, it's at 60 FPS and you're able to see everything
Yep.
fluidly, and things just move fast. So, like, take that concept. I try to apply that type of narrative and concept to anything in a live event, especially something where emotions would be heightened. There might be a fight or flight thing going on in people's heads, like where their adrenaline spiked. There's crazy stuff going on in that moment, especially JFK assassination. These people who witnessed it, apparently, or claim they witnessed it. And it's like, yeah, in those situations, maybe they looked over and they glanced for a second before they turned their head, because there's like people smacking into them or they're trying to run. And yeah, when they glanced, they looked for literally a fraction of a second, and they just see
Right.
the limo that's going really slow. We're talking like maybe 3 or 4 miles per hour instead of 11 miles per hour. And they go, oh, I saw it. It stopped. I saw it clear as day. And then you go and talk to them. And then if someone would actually, investigate them more and really put pressure, then it's like, did you really see it stop? So tell me, walk me through the events. And then they lay it out going, oh, well, I just looked over. Okay, so how long did you look at it? Oh, a second. It's like, while all this other stuff was going on. So you're saying you only were focusing on that, but you only looked at it for a second. And for a fact it was not moving whatsoever while things are running in front of your face and like all this stuff. That's the problem I have, is that it drives me nuts when people say like, oh, we know it stopped because of witnesses. I'm like, yeah, well, half the time witnesses are full of crap. And it's not that they're full of crap because they're intentionally trying to lie. It's more of, you have to really dive into that witness and like pick their brain to get the proper perspective that was happening at that time from their viewpoint. So it's like that changes the narrative. So anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Well, so on this, one of the issues that I have with people saying that the film was altered, altering the Zapruder film. Which, if you're gonna alter the Zapruder film, how come nobody ever talks about any of the other films showing the events from a different perspective as having possibly been altered? No, they pick on Zapruder, and then they, of course, I don't. I think it's probably they're just misusing the term video when they say the video was altered. The video was altered. Um, the film, the original artifact, is a piece of translucent or you know, plastic synthetic film that was being exposed at a rate of 18 frames per second. And we know what the total frame count in the Zapruder film is, being 486. And that's how they come up with 8 seconds to fire 3 shots, is because they know what the length of, they know how fast the film is moving. And so they can start counting from when they first think that the president, that Kennedy has been hit, which is frame 225, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And then we know the length of time if we divide that, or whatever the math is, frame 225, whether you think it's frame 225 or frame 176, we know what the math is from that numbered frame to the frame that is historically Time Life didn't publish frame 313, and it's blocked out or grayed out, censored out, even on my videos. I've deliberately done it on my TikTok videos. Put the little, blurred thing right there on frame 313. That's the fatal headshot, right? You see his brains go up in the air.
Mm-hmm.
Frame 313. That's also the frame that people point to when they say that the driver did it, because there's the gun. And my whole point is that there is no human reaction, no instinctive movement, no physical, you see it and then physically like stepping on the brakes. There's no reaction time.
Yeah.
It is 1/18 of a second. It's just not. It's 18 frames in 1 second. So when they talk about missing frames, we know that of the 486 frames of the Zapruder film, that 4 were damaged in the development and duplication process. But there's no amount of frames that they could cut out of the Zapruder film that would change what you see or change the fact that the limo didn't actually stop. You would think that I would be on the side of the Zapruder film has been altered, because there's no reason for anybody to alter the Zapruder film other than to support the single bullet theory that Oswald did it alone. So on the one hand, you have people saying that the film clearly shows the driver doing it, which it doesn't,
Mm-mm.
and also saying that the film has been altered. But here, this all came up again recently. And if you like true crime stories on Netflix, which I'm sure that we all do, recently there was a 3-part, 4-part documentary called The Octopus Murders,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
Conspiracy. There's a longer title, but commonly known as on Netflix as The Octopus Murders. And oh man, after I watched it, I enjoyed it. That miniseries, that true crime documentary, was not about the Kennedy murder. But guess how many people tagged me in it because of a 3-minute section in episode 3, in which the person that they're interviewing is making a point. The person that they're interviewing, and this clip is all over TikTok, and I've been tagged in it so many times. People trying to prove to me that the Zapruder film has been altered. They cut out this one section in which the woman tells the story, and I won't give the whole thing away, nor could I remember it all, except for this part. She tells the story of a CIA character showing her the film, the Zapruder film, and saying to her, basically in that film, the copies are so degenerated at that point. But he points to the driver turning and shooting him, but he also points to the tree in the background as appearing to float in midair, as proof that this is, his point was, this is the real film that you've been watching, and what everybody else has been seeing is the edited version. So to sum it up, if that's even possible, he's showing her this really bad copy of the Zapruder film and telling her that that's the real one, and the other one that most people have seen is the fake one.
Yeah.
Now, why would he do this? Why would he do this? And this was the point of the documentary because it relates into the rest of the story that isn't about JFK. The whole point of that little excerpt is that the way disinformation works is uh, gaslighting, right? You tell somebody that this is what you're seeing, and this other thing isn't real, expressly for the purpose that you can have plausible deniability later.
Mm-hmm.
Because if anybody then turns around and says, "Well, this is the real film," and the one that most people have seen is the altered one, then if it's me, I can simply say you're crazy, and that is disinformation. So
Yeah.
all of it is a cloud, it's fog that has been thrown up. And the point of that miniseries was not that the driver did it, but that this is what misinformation is and how it works.
Yeah.
A lot of interesting things about that documentary. None of it relates to JFK.
Yeah.
Yet I get tagged in that 3-minute clip all the time as if the Zapruder film has been altered. But nobody can tell me, nobody can explain to me how it's been altered.
No, and they
And
can't. And it looked like Evan wanted to contribute something.
Yeah,
To the
I, I,
topic.
th-
all right,
I,
go ahead.
I think the idea behind that is the original
Zapruder.
Zapruder film is the original, and that is the authentic one, where the Octopus Murders one is the one that is doctored, and where they try to say that you can plainly see the driver turning around with a firearm in his
Right.
hand. There is an old lady who's the one who's saying that in the clip. So I am on your side to where the driver wouldn't really have the time to do that, and why would he do that in the public daylight? Why wouldn't he do it under an overpass that they were directly headed toward?
Plus, the service weapon that he was carrying, it would have been obvious if he fired the shot. It would have had recoil. You would have seen a movement, and it would have been caught in the frames.
And there would have
even though it
been-
was like even though it was a lower FPS count, it doesn't matter. You fire a gun of that caliber, it's gonna be obvious that he fired the shot.
And
It will
there
be
would
on
have
the gun
been
itself.
carbon that's left over from the gunpowder. There would have been a casing in the vehicle. All of this stuff would have been talked about for
Especially with him
years.
turning this way, the shell casing would have hit him in the face because of if he was turning this way over this shoulder, that shell casing would have hit him in the face. It
And-
would have been in the car. It
and
would not have gone
with
out.
Conley and his wife in the vehicle as well. Wouldn't they be like, "Yeah, I saw the driver turn around and shoot"?
Oh yeah, their ears
Like-
would have been. They wouldn't have. Their ears would have been ringing if someone fired a handgun right next
You
to
would see the
them.
muzzle flash in the vehicle. You would see all sorts of things. It
Oh,
doesn't make
yeah.
any sense. It
Yeah.
truly just doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. And sorry. Go ahead.
Guys, nobody, when they're talking about this, nobody talks about the fact that William Greer stayed in the Secret Service for another 3 years before then retiring. He gave interviews, and he always expressed remorse about not stepping on the gas a second sooner than he did.
Oh yeah. No, it haunted that guy.
But I'm just, if you believe that he's credible at all, then you cannot believe the driver did it. But I'll touch on one more thing and keep an eye on the clock for
Yeah.
me. November 2023. You remember what happened?
What
and
part
it-
of 23? There's been a lot of crazy
November.
things going on.
November.
There's a lot of crazy
November-
things that happen in
November.
November too, but I don't know which one.
Well, November 2023 was the 60th anniversary of the assassination.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that was the whole big event that my TikTok account was heading up towards. And I was going to go to Dallas, and I ended up not going, and a lot of personal crap happened in my life. So I ended up not going to Dallas, and I'll get there one day and hope to meet you guys.
Yeah, please.
No, please.
November of 2023, big New York Times story, Washington Post. Well, it was all over. Story breaks that Paul Landis, a Secret Service Secret Service agent, comes forward. He's got a new book And in that book, Paul Landis says, I'm the one who found CE 399 on the back seat of the limo. And then I picked it up, put it in my pocket, walked into the hospital, didn't know what else to do, but wanted them to find it. And he's the one that placed it on the stretcher. The bullet in the National Archives today. That's Paul Landis. This gentleman he's 80 plus years old now. Bless his heart. But this story was all over the news, and it's the most recent JFK news. Well, no, it's not the most recent, but it was a story coming out just in time for the 60th anniversary. Now,
How
you
convenient.
have to either discredit this very nice old guy as being a liar, or you have to discredit the single bullet theory. And you can ask yourselves, well, how is it that he finds a bullet on the backseat of the limo? Well, that's pretty easy to me. I'll turn the argument around on the people who like to come into my comments and say bullets do weird things. Like that's their explanation. So I think this bullet might have done a weird thing because in the FBI's report on the autopsy, the doctors doing the autopsy probe the back wound and don't find a point of exit. And the autopsy, they are stopped from examining it further. They never connect the back wound, which JFK definitely had, to what was supposedly the exit wound in the throat, which he also definitely had. Two wounds. But the two aren't connected. They can find there's no depth other than a fingertip to that entry wound in the back. And so if you're willing to believe that a pristine bullet made 7 wounds, landed in Connolly's thigh, and then somehow in between the limo and the stretcher in the hallway, that bullet bounced out of Connolly's leg. Not just bounced out of Connolly's leg, but I guess back through the very hole in his trousers that it made in order for it to land on the stretcher.
Yep.
Then you certainly ought to be able to believe the same thing about a bullet falling out of Kennedy's back after it's made a wound of which there is no exit wound. But back to Paul Landis. The guy was there. Now he was on Jackie's detail, just like Clint Hill was. Clint Hill is still alive. He's pushing 90. He's a very nice gentleman. He's written books. He's made appearances. To this day, Clint Hill says it was Oswald from the School Book Depository. And then here comes his buddy, who was younger, Paul Landis. He'd only been in the Secret Service a couple, 3 years. He and Clint, that was Jackie's detail. Clint Hill jumps off the limo, jumps off the follow-up car, and jumps on the back of the limo. Paul Landis does not, but they get to the hospital and they're scouring the limo for evidence. They find these fragments. Paul Landis picks up the fragments that are covered in blood, sets them back down, then finds the pristine bullet on the back upholstery.
Yeah, someone
rear
placed
seat.
it. That was planted. Someone put it there. That was not. It's very obvious to me at that point.
And so was it planted in the limo for Paul Landis to find? Did Paul Landis do the planting? What is Paul Landis's culpability here? But in any case, he's the one that picked it up and put it on the stretcher,
Yeah.
and that's the magic bullet
Yeah.
that
Wow.
we know today.
Wow.
I find Paul Landis now. His book, I've read it, and the first 3/4 of it, he spends time. It's very interesting if you're interested in the Secret Service. How he came to be a young college graduate getting into the Secret Service and how he came to be on presidential detail and in Dallas that day. And the last quarter of the book is exactly his recollection of everything that happened.
Yeah.
And many reasons given why he didn't come forward with that story until we had been years down this rabbit trail of the single bullet theory.
Yeah.
I find him credible. And I think the magic bullet theory, if it hasn't already been clearly debunked before, is debunked by Paul Landis. But yeah, I mean, it's been 60 years, and
Yeah.
are we ever gonna convince. I know the latest. There's 70% of in recent as 2022, recent polls indicate that 70% of America believes that at least there was a conspiracy, that
Oh
something
yeah,
is fishy, and the Warren Commission is
without
horseshit.
a doubt. But with that being said, um, you know, I think we should. I want to take a moment, because I know I know we're about to kind of wrap all this up. Um,
Yeah,
but I want to take final thoughts real quick. We'll keep it short
sure.
and sweet per person because I want to hear from everyone on it. Um, like basically, if you had to give a what your final thoughts are on the overall JFK assassination, who potentially was involved, and how it really transpired, and sum it up into like a 30-second statement. Um, I want to do that real quick to just kind of like lay it out, what we think, and then we can go ahead and we pretty much will wrap it up at that point because we're about to hit time for us on our end.
Oh,
Sure.
it's pretty simple for me. The CIA did it with ties with the mafia, and they used Oswald as a patsy through MK Ultra and brainwashing.
Mm-hmm.
That's my theories.
That's your theories. I'll save mine for last just because mine's weird, or I don't think it's weird. But what are your like final just summed up thoughts on it, Skip?
Uh, uh, Oswald knew that something was happening. He perhaps thought that he was there to foil a plot to assassinate Kennedy because he was serving the CIA. He was not on the sixth floor at 12:30 p.m. on November 22nd. He was in the lunchroom at 12:30 p.m. And in no way does he behave at any time leading up to or after like someone who has just pulled off the crime of the century. Beyond that, yeah, I think the CIA had its fingers in it and tried to cover it up for 60 years.
Yep. I yeah, no, I don't disagree. Uh, my viewpoint on it is I think it wasn't just the CIA. I think there was enough just doing research on JFK himself and everyone he was pissing off by all the changes he was making and wanting to make and do, which he already started on some, and it pissed a lot of people off. I think it was, I think overall, I think it was a in the best interest of multiple parties to make this happen, between the CIA, the military-industrial complex, uh, the mafia, or the organized crime, because they were directly hand in hand with the CIA on tons of stuff leading up to JFK assassination, Lyndon B. Johnson, and how it plays into like the oil and things like that going on in Texas, and then basically the anti-Castro Cuban files, or sorry, exiles, not files, anti-Castro Cuban exiles. You take all of that and you see the benefit that all of them would get so heavily, and they all are intertwined together on the back end, which it's a known fact now. I think it was a multi-purpose interest, and I think that they all just kind of decide, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to take care of the op. We're going to make sure it happens. It could have been the CIA or whomever, someone who had the strongest ability to make that happen and influence. And they utilized everyone else when it was needed. So like misinformation witnesses, things of that nature that did not fully line up, but they didn't care. You just throw someone out there claiming something or saying something. It makes people question a narrative, of whatever is already going on at the time. So I think that there was a lot of misinformation people placed. And I think that it was a multi-interest operation. And I think one party ultimately executed it, and with maybe some assistance from, for some grunt work from a couple of the other ones, like maybe the mafia. Hence, they're the ones who shot Lee Harvey Oswald, so he couldn't talk. Things like that, and then finally, at the end of it all, I think that what I feel like people should talk about more is the fact that when JFK, when you see him get shot, and his head starts to go forward, and all of a sudden it blows backwards. The car was slowing down still. It was still going slow. It had never accelerated yet when his head flew back. And when his head flows back and his brains blow out, he obviously was shot. Oops, sorry. He obviously was shot basically directly in front of him. And what was directly in front of JFK's car in direct line of sight was the railroad overpass.
Yep.
And in which they also call it like the what was it? It's not just
The triple overpass.
the triple overpass. And if you've ever been over there, because I have,
Many times.
and you look at where JFK would have been, the you can't miss.
It's a direct line
You
of
can't
sight.
miss, and it's elevated, so you have the high ground. It's a direct line of sight. You're not shooting a target moving left or right. It's someone moving towards you at a slow downward angle, technically you could say, because you have an elevated position. So that shot is an easy shot. The timing would be an easy, especially since the target's moving really slow moving forward, because the car was basically going like at that point 3 to maybe 5 miles per hour. That is a ideal perfect shot. And there was what was the House committee who did the research?
House Select Committee
Yeah,
on
House Select
the
Committee.
HSCA.
Their acoustics evidence. They had acoustic evidence for the railroad overpass, like that would indicate a shot came from there, and that would line up perfectly with his head blowing backwards, directly back. Because if he got shot by the grassy knoll in the head, that was from the front, but to the right. Or sorry, well, if you're looking at the motorcade, the motorcade would have been to the right at that angle. So if they shot him, his head would not fly back perfectly this way. It would have been backwards, but probably at an angle. It would have made his head manipulate. It wouldn't go directly backwards.
Yeah.
So I think it was a joint effort, multiple interest party, and I think that there was multiple shooters.
And with all that said, Skip, tell the people where they can find you and come do some more research and reach out to you at.
Hey, I have been super honored to be on, and all of my content is strictly on TikTok. JFK 60 years later, and you can find me over there. And I have a couple of other smaller social media accounts which do not have anything to do with this topic. So it is strictly a TikTok thing for me. Having said that, when you look at if you're interested in this stuff and you need a jumping off point for studying JFK, certainly you can start with my TikTok. In my profile, I have a link tree, and that link tree will take you to legit resources, including the National Archives and copies of the Zapruder film and the Mary Farrell Foundation. And all of these are legit internet archives for researching the topic. All the files that have been released, you can download in PDF form, so it's all there. My profile is just a starting point, hopefully, to help people find and read this information for themselves. I do not have a podcast because I had to pick one thing. I enjoy what you guys are doing on this podcast. When people ask me about podcasts about JFK, and I'm sorry, you can cut this out if you want, but I am plugging. I have my answer on podcast about JFK is there's kind of the economy size, the mid size, and the full size version of it. So if you don't have much time, I would listen to Who Killed JFK, which is the Rob Reiner podcast. He actually names names in that podcast. So that's the economy size. You can get into it and out of it pretty quick, 10, 11 episodes. Then I'm actually friends with another creator whose name is Matt, and he runs the Solving JFK podcast. And Solving JFK is also on TikTok, and I follow him also. That's the mid-size. He's a lawyer. I'm friends with him, I'm proud to say. Been live with him before. He does a great job of taking issue by issue and bringing a evidentiary sort of look at the actual details of the case. That's a great one. The big full-size Mac Daddy one that I have not even begun to scratch the surface on is JFK: The Enduring Secret with Jeff Crudell, and that's hundreds of hours and episodes on just JFK. For that reason, I think that we don't need another JFK podcast out there. I can't finish the ones that I follow, much less start one. And I'm not bringing anything new. Do please follow me on JFK 60 years later on TikTok, and I'm happy to hear all opinions, and I'll respond to a few of them.
Excellent,
Yeah.
Skip. We were
Yeah.
so happy to have you here, bud.
Yep.
We'll talk to you soon. Yeah.
Yep. And then,
Yeah, absolutely.
thank you very much. You've made a friend with us 120%.
That's right.
And if
It's
anyone,
been super.
yeah, it's been great. I
It's been
loved
super
it.
fun. I'm happy to do it again sometime if you want. I know there's
Oh,
other
yeah.
people out there,
Oh, we would love to have you
Yeah.
back.
but
If you
I
ever
will
make
follow
it,
your channel with interest.
yeah, if you ever make it to Dallas, we will go with you and walk out all the stuff, and I'll show you those entry points, or we'll show you the entry points to those like tunnels that go up in there, and they're full-size tunnels. You can stand up and run in those things. It's not like you're having to
Yeah,
crouch or crawl.
You could drive a car in them.
So and you can drive a whole freaking car.
I'd be
So
I'd be delighted to have a tour guide.
yeah,
Don't
no, it'd
know
be fun.
exactly when that'll happen, but I will need somebody when I get there. So I will hit you up. I really appreciate it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We'll talk to you later, Skip.
Yep, we will catch
All
you
right,
on the flip
thanks,
side.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.